Well, hello everybody on our webinar today. This is Dave Lissy. I'm the CEO of Bright Horizons, and on behalf of our entire team, I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Modern Families, Modern Employers, and highlighting the new research coming from our Modern Family Index and hearing from some true experts in the field around these issues. I'm coming to you we're all three of your speakers today are in three different locations, the modern technology at its best. I'm coming to you from Bright Horizons headquarters outside of Boston. We'll hear from Tammy Erickson, who is in the UK today, and Maryella Gockel, who comes to us from New Jersey from Ernst Young. I just wanted to quickly first say we are thrilled. We've had more than 600 people sign up for this webinar, including many of you who are proud to serve as clients of Bright Horizons and many other leading employers out there who are interested in this issue. I think it underscores how critical the set of issues we're going to talk about today are as it relates to business success. Just a quick word about Bright Horizons for those of you not familiar with us. We are the world's leading global provider of employer-sponsored child care, backup care, elder care, educational advising, tuition assistance services, and work-life consulting. And we've had kind of a front row seat over the course of the past 27 years as we've helped more than 850 leading employers to support positive employee engagement, promote productivity, retention, and well-being through the variety of services that we offer. But we've come at this issue both as a solutions provider but also as an employer ourselves. We employ 25,000 people in 6 countries, and our goal from the start was that we could not help others become an employer of choice if we were not one ourselves. And we've been proud, along with many of you, to be featured as one of Fortune Magazine's 100 best companies to work for in America for 15 straight years. So a little bit about today's event, and just to go over the agenda. We'll explore quickly the findings of Bright Horizons' recent research, the Modern Family Index, and its implications for today's employers. But we're only going to touch on that because you're free to download copies of that study for more detail, and we don't want to take up a lot of time today going over all the detail. Most of today will be about hearing from our guests. First, our award-winning author, Tammy Erickson, on the state of today's workforce, and we'll also hear from Mariela Gockel about how Ernst Young is engaging and supporting its modern families. Before we start our program, I've been asked to go over some housekeeping items. First, if you experience any technical difficulties, please click the Help button or type a question into the Q&A box so that our hosts may assist you. We also want to encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the question widget and click Submit. Today's webinar will last about an hour, and we're going to dedicate time at the end to Q&A following our presentations. We strive to host these events to provide you as HR leaders with useful and actionable content, and I hope you'll take a moment once the event is over to complete our brief evaluation survey so that we continue to make these kinds of things more useful to you over time. We're going to ask you also to participate. You can't just be on the line without participating. We're going to ask you a few polling questions today, and if you turn off your pop-up blocker so that you can better address the polling questions that come to you, we'd appreciate it. And feel free to explore the widgets at the bottom of your screen. You'll find the speaker bios, access to the Q&A feature, and ways to contact us at Bright Horizons or to read our blog. Lastly, before I get going, in addition to our Solutions at Work webinar series, of which today's program is part of, we occasionally host live events for the HR community. Our upcoming Solutions at Work live events include our Midwest Regional Forum on October 23rd in Chicago. For those of you in the Midwest, you'll get a full day and a half program. And our annual Solutions at Work Live Conference, which is our feature event of the year. It's a multi-day event packed with networking and thoughtful leadership activities, and that happens in April of 2015 in Pasadena, California. To get yourself on the list for these and all of our other invitation-only events, sign up for the Solutions at Work newsletter on our website. All right, that's enough for our housekeeping. Let's move on to the main event today. And before we kick into our first speaker, we're going to start, or before I kick into a little bit more about the Modern Family Index, we're going to start with a little warm-up poll. So if you get ready, and we'd ask your participation, we'd ask the first question, which is, what percentage of working dads do you think say trying to achieve work-life balance is stressful? Based on our survey of thousands of working dads, how many of them would say achieving a work-life balance is, in their minds, stressful? First 12%, 28%, 42%, 50%. I feel like we should have a little Jeopardy music, but we are getting lots of quick responses. It's kind of neat to see the colors play out here. Okay, so it looks like many of you got it close to right or right. The actual answer from our survey was 42% of working dads said that achieving a work-life balance they find stressful. Many of you said 50. You're not far off. The key here is that historically, one of the things that we've been saying for a long time, and you're listening here to a working dad, that this is not a women's issue alone. This is a family issue. It's a working parent issue, an issue that has been evolving, for both working moms and dads over time. So quickly about the Modern Family Index that we did at Bright Horizons. This is the latest in a series of research that we've been doing for years, trying to sort of take the temperature of how working people are feeling about their balance between work and life. We've been committed to this. We've published a whole series of research reports. If you're interested in our past reports, you can find them on our website. And what I would tell you about the Modern Family Index is the results, to me, are not necessarily groundbreaking, but they're refreshing in that they update what are a series of concerns that I think have been voiced in different ways and shine a fresh new light on certain areas, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And I believe, most importantly, they provide a conduit to an important conversation for today's leading employers. As we take a look at the data that we get from the report, you can see that there are many things that we found from the survey, and some of them include that, not surprisingly, 1 in 5 working parents today worry that caring for their own parents will be a reality in the next 5 to 10 years. And obviously, I am a card-carrying member of the sandwich generation in that same boat with young children and worried about, elderly parents. I think this has the potential to be one of the more critical issues that we face going forward. We found things like when we asked what was most important to working parents in America today, not surprisingly, more than 3/4 of the people who responded to the survey said that family was the most important issue they're facing. And as I talked about earlier, working dads continue to express their desire to be more involved with family. And the mistake I think the media makes on this issue, and many people make on this issue, is they try to put this as only a working mom's issue, when in fact I think this is an issue that, as I said earlier, everyone faces. So as we think about the poll question that comes up next, I want to get you involved again and ask you another question about, what percentage of your workforce do you think have children under the age of 6? So we ask your thoughts on this question. What percentage of your workforce do you think have children under the age of 6? And it looks like your answer is coming in right in the 25 to 50% of your workforce having children under the age of 6. And we asked that question in part to prompt yet another important finding that we found in our study that supports the data that we found historically. And the thing that's always grabbed me about how people feel about reliable child care, and if you look to the far right of this slide, we found 35% of those that answered our study said that they will turn down a higher paying job offer for quality, reliable child care, which to me has always been a finding that's been in and around that range as we've studied our working people over the course of the past 20-plus years. So the Modern Family Index really, as you saw from a variety of slides you looked at, really was yet another in a series of our research that shines a light on the importance of this conversation and the importance of studying this issue going forward, and its importance on business productivity and business success. So you've heard a lot from me so far. So let me get somebody else involved in the conversation. Our first speaker, who is a true expert in the field and somebody who is a delight to listen to. I've had the good fortune of hearing her present a number of times live over the years, and I hope that those of you listening in the HR community will have that same good fortune over time. She was kind enough to speak at our client conference several years ago, and we're thrilled to have her on today's webinar. As you can see from her bio, her accolades speak for themselves. She's a McKinsey award-winning author. She's the founder of Tammy Erickson Associates. Her firm's dedicated to helping clients build solutions and work with many leading companies in many different ways over time. She's also kind enough to join us from the UK today, where she's traveling. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Tammy Erickson. Tammy?
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you from London today. I'm over here at London Business School and delighted to spend some time with my good friends from Bright Horizons. What I'd like to do is offer a little bit of context about the work that we've just seen and share with you a bit about why I think the kinds of results that Bright Horizons has gotten in the Modern Family Index are coming to bear. First, let me show you a little bit of data. So the slide you're looking at right now shows you that Xers are less likely to be married than Boomers. And this is a slide that goes back to the early days of Xers, so it shows them when they're starting out in their career. But you can see that if you look at the purple is men, the blue is women, and you can see the percent married on the left and the percent unmarried on the right. And you see substantial growth in the number of both men and women who were unmarried early in their careers when they were starting out. Now, if we take a look at whether they're working outside the home, we can see that while men have remained fairly stable, that in fact the number of women working outside the home, both married and unmarried, has increased substantially. And probably the most important to note is the percentage of married women who are working outside the home. So right now we're picking up a little bit of data here that begins to show us where this complication is coming from. We don't have the old Ozzie and Harriet families anymore where people are staying home and you've got one spouse at home to care for the home front and one spouse working. All of a sudden we're beginning to see more and more two-career families. Now, if we take a look yet further and begin to look at what's happening, sorry, I think I want to go back one to show this to you. There's the one I wanted you to see. If we take a look at Xer moms and what's happening with them, particularly Xer moms are much more likely to work outside the home than Boomer moms were. So particularly, let's look at with young children. If you look way on the right-hand side of this chart, you can see mothers with children under the age of 3. And the dark blue are Boomer moms. You can see that about 30% of them worked outside the home. But that doubles to over 60% with Gen X moms. So we've got a far higher percentage of Gen X moms than we do of boomer moms who are trying to juggle both work and motherhood. This is one of the reasons also we ask you the question about what you thought in your workforce. And my guess is that you may actually have underestimated a little bit the number of people with kids under 6, because my suspicion is it may even be a little higher than you think it is if you had the data. But nonetheless, a very important segment in the workforce. Okay, those are the numbers. Now let's step back and ask ourselves what's really happening in people's views. Why are their attitudes changing? Because that's another important part of what's happening here. It turns out that each of us actually has a very important lens that we carry around that gives us a perspective on the world. And interestingly, that lens tends to be formed when we're young kids. Events happen that causes us to form opinions about who we're going to trust and what we want to do with our lives, what's important. And that ends up having a very important impact on the way we make decisions when we're adults. So if we take a look at views on parenting, I find there are some very substantial differences when I talk to different generations. When I talk with boomers, the primary thing they say to me is, I want to help my kids be successful. I want to prepare them to win. I want to prepare them to compete in the world out there. So this idea of helping the kids be successful is a very important theme that comes through in my conversations with boomers. If we talk to Xers, however, then it's much more common that I get an answer that sounds like, I want to be a good parent. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what's the difference? Help the kids be successful and be a good parent. Those things align, right? Well, yes, they may align in the end towards the end goal. But what I believe is a lot of what we're seeing in today's surveys, such as the Family Index, is a result of these different views on what it means to be a parent. When I talk to Ys, their primary comment is, I want to make sure I'm making the most of the experience, making the most of every day. Let's think about how that begins to play out. It brings about, in fact, very different behaviors. So boomers take that, I want to help my kids be successful, and translate it into, if I work hard and make money, long hours, sacrifice, that's a win-win. It's good for my career and good for my kids. So in many cases, boomers equated being a good parent with their hard work ethic. The longer they worked, the more money they made, the better off they would be in terms of helping their children be successful. Xers, however, tend to think of that quite differently. So an Xer might say, I need to evaluate all the new positions or opportunities that the company offers to me against the commitment I made to myself before I had children to make sure I can handle both. I want to be a good parent, and I've got to ask myself whether this work responsibility will interfere with the commitment of being a good parent. You can already start to see the conflicts that shape up from those two different points of view. Now, as I mentioned, both of these come out of experiences that people had when they were younger. Developmental psychology tells us that kids learn different things at different ages. And in fact, this chipper young man shown here is Dr. Jean Piaget. Dr. Piaget and his colleagues have told us that different kids learn different things at different times. And so if you have little kids at home, ages 2, 3, etc., they're likely focused on tangible things, how things work, whether if you push a button, a noise occurs, or if you turn a crank, a clown jumps out of a jumping box. But around age 11, we begin to really wrestle with some of the ideas that are existing in the world around us. What's happening, and what does it mean for me? And ages 11 to 15 are our most important formative years, and they were quite different for boomers and for members of Generation X. Generation X grew up at a time when they tended to be quite self-reliant. Many were latchkey kids. They were taking care of themselves. Divorce rates were skyrocketing. Divorce rates actually went from about 20% when these guys were babies to about 50% today. They tend to be mistrustful of institutions, and they saw corporate layoffs when they were younger. In fact, one of the surveys that was done when Gen Xers were in college asked whether they were more confident they'd see a UFO or a Social Security check from the U.S. government in the course of their lifetime. And the vast majority chose a UFO over a government Social Security check. So there wasn't really a strong sense that this is a generation that was expecting to see a lot of payback from institutions throughout their life. Most of them, I find, have been very thoughtful about the decision of whether or not they wanted to become a parent. And those that made the decision to do so did it with a determination to be there for their children, perhaps in a different way than their own parents were there for them. So very much focused on that sense of being a good parent as a driver that comes out of the events they saw as childhood. If we take a look at boomers, we see a different set of experiences. Boomers grew up at a time of protest. It tends to be a group that was somewhat anti-authoritarian and a bit idealistic. But what was really important, I would argue, in the boomer development was the fact that it was crowded. There were so many boomer kids. And so boomers learned early on that you had to be good. You had to work hard, work long, be competitive, be the best in order to survive in a world where there were more people than there were opportunities to be had. And as a result, many of them have translated that view to their view of parenting. They see being a parent as helping their kids be more competitive. They don't recognize that the world, in fact, for their kids is not actually quite as crowded as it was for them, but they translate that same sense of urgency and competitiveness when they think about their parenting role. Another interesting difference with boomers is they tend to have been, frankly, I think, a little unappreciative of the role of their own parents. As teens, in a survey done in 1974, more than 40% of boomers said they'd be better off with no parents. Now, if we take a look at Gen Y, we see something different still. Gen Y is a generation that grew up surrounded by, unfortunately, many of the events of terrorism and school violence. They saw 9/11, they saw Columbine, etc. And this is a generation, as a result, that tends to be very much eager to make the most out of every day. They don't want to be caught in a random event where something could happen unless they know they've really made the most of every day that they have. So when they think about work, two things. One, they don't feel they have anything to prove, particularly young women. They know women can work. They've had working mothers. They've seen female CEOs and heads of state. So the question of could I do it is not one that's on their mind. For them, the question is more, is it the best use of my time? Is it something I really want to do? And they think about that in the context of making the most of every day. They are digital natives, of course, and they're very family-centric. They tend to describe their parents as their role models and heroes. And in contrast to the boomer numbers I showed you, as teens, 90% of these Ys reported being very close to their parents in their teen years. So some different experiences which translate into different attitudes about parenting, and I think lead directly to some of the results that we've seen so far. So the views expressed in the Modern Family Index, in my view, are very logical. They represent legitimate differences that these generations have on families, on parenting. And one of the big imperatives for corporations today is to develop an empathy about that. it's easy, frankly, for older executives, some of us who are boomers and who maybe parented in a different way and worked in a different way, to think that others should follow our lead. But the reality is the values are very different today. Many parents of young children today care about different things, want different things, and I think we see that reflected very sharply in the wonderful data that we've just had a glimpse of. With that, I'm going to pause and ask you to really think about how, as employers, you can begin to address these issues. Our next guest is going to discuss that in more detail, but to begin to think about that, let me put up a polling question that we would ask you to answer, and then I think Dave's going to pop back in and introduce our next speaker. The polling question is, in the coming year, does your organization plan to explore or engage in any of the following? And you can actually check all the boxes that apply to you. Child or elder care, building a more supportive culture, caregiver support programs, and financial well-being programs. Thank you very much for listening to me, and we'll look forward to seeing the answers.
Okay, Tammy, thank you so much. See, the poll questions are coming in fast here, and it appears as if many of you are checking many boxes. Looks like childcare and elder care supports at 69% leads the way, more supportive culture, and really across the board. Which I think is reflective of needs across generations and across different life stages. Tammy, I'm always fascinated by your talks and your work. And as a parent of digital natives, I'm very happy to have my own in-house IT department at home, as technologically challenged as I am. So thank you so much. And I'm going to now, in a minute, turn it over to Maryella Gockel. But before I do that, I just want to remind you of two things. There's been several questions that have come in asking whether or not you will get copies of the slides. And I just want to tell you that we will actually push you all copies of the slides via email after today's webinar. So you don't have to do anything. You'll get a copy of all the slides you see today. And then secondly, I want to remind you to use the question widget there. We've gotten a good flow of questions thus far, but if you're interested, or Tammy has sort of come up with something you'd like to ask more about, or as you listen to Mariela in a minute and you come up with questions, please go ahead and send them in. So with that, I'm proud to introduce somebody who I've had a chance to work with over the years, both as a client of ours and also as a fellow board member in several situations, working hard on these issues. I think she's well known in the field, and deservedly so. Has made a big impact, I think, on the field and also on her organization. She is the Ernst Young America's Flexibility Leader, Maryella Gockel. So Mariela, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. And Tammy, I loved your slides. I also have two children, digital natives, and Dave, I agree, having them around and helping with my IT challenges is pretty good. I've been with EY for about 34 years, and I think Tammy aptly described at least my boomer behavior when it comes to work. So thank you for that nice introduction. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with EY, EY is a very large professional services firm. We have about 190,000 people in about 150 countries and 700 offices around the world. And we do provide advisory, assurance, tax, and TAS services, as well as CBS, which is our core business services, the service line that I belong to. So Dave talked a little bit about what we've done at EY, and many of you, I do know, that are on the phone have heard us talk about flexible working at EY and why we do it and what it offers to our people and to the exceptional client service that we offer to our clients. So when we think about flexible working, we really think about it as the way we can deliver that exceptional service to our clients, because it does allow us to do all the things that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, and that is it does provide us with greater collaboration, faster response time, in addition to enhanced engagement, which I'll talk about in a bit. It also focuses on our sustainable environment and ensuring that we are able to support the communities in which we live and work. So one of the things that we are always interested in at EY is data. And so we do a lot of research, and Tammy, again, I appreciate all the research that your organization has done, and Dave, your Modern Families research that Bright Horizons has done really dovetails wonderfully with what we have done at EY. We did this survey at EY with all external professionals, not people internal to EY. And one of the most interesting things that we found when we looked at this survey on generations was that Gen X would more likely walk away from a job if they were not afforded flexible working or flexibility. But what was most fascinating, and Dave and Tammy made this point, that flexibility is not just a women's issue. We found that Gen X men were more likely to leave a job than Gen X women, and Gen Y men were more likely to leave their work if they were not afforded flexible working than Gen Y women. So why do we care? And if we take a look at the next slide, we found when we looked at our Global People Survey results that flexibility is a top driver of retention at EY. If you look at this data point, we found that 6 percentage points higher in groups, retention was 6% higher in our groups that were in the top quartile on our Global People Survey questions around flexible working than those in the bottom quartile. 6 percentage points. Many of you can do the math in your head, and that is a significant savings when you start calculating turnover. So what else is a top driver? One is all around trust. The fact that you can trust your team to deliver on their commitments, and the fact that your manager trusts you to make the right decisions. So flexible working and trust go hand in hand. When we dug a little deeper around engagement, what we found was through, again, another research that EY did, what we call the business linkage research, we found that engagement leads to better business results. It's probably no surprise to those folks on the phone that we found that professionals had higher retention rates, as we just talked about. Our revenue growth, again, looking at best in class compared to the bottom quartile, 10 percentage points higher, and our gross margin was 6 percentage points higher. So a significant contribution to the bottom line. So what does all of this mean when we look at EY and working parents? So what I talked about was EY in general, and now I'd like to dive in a little bit more on our working parents. One of the things that we found when we looked at engagement overall is that our working parents were among the most engaged professionals at EY. And why is that? Well, we do provide a lot of great tools and programs at EY. We have great vendors like Bright Horizons that offer backup childcare. We have lactation support. We provide things around new parent development, how and what they can expect from EY. We've got affinity groups around professional networks, including what we call today's families. And everyone is very focused on what a family looks like today. And our families do, to Tammy's point, look very different today than they might have looked 5 years or 10 years or even 20 or 30 years when some of us were building our families. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about on this slide was the fact that many of us have done some coaching around families, and EY launched a coaching program back in December of 2012 that provides one-on-one coaching to many of the families that are building their families through birth or adoption. I found it fascinating when I looked at the Modern Family Index that many families were concerned about taking vacation, and that was something that Bright Horizons study had really focused on, the fact that families were challenged about taking vacation. We did another survey called a Career Values Survey, again looking at people both inside and outside of EY, and what we found with people in EY was that vacation was a positive predictor of performance, meaning that the more vacation hours that were taken in the prior year actually reflected better performance in the following year. And that held true in all countries across the Americas, that vacation really correlated with length of service. So the more vacation people took, the longer they stayed. Now that may have something to do with the fact that EY offers 3 weeks, a minimum of 3 weeks of vacation for all employees, regardless of rank or level. So everyone is eligible for 3 weeks. Many of you have participated or had participated or were able to watch on the live webcast the White House Summit on Working Families that was held in June of 2014. Our new global CEO, Mark Weinberger, was asked to attend and was on the first plenary session. And he actually has 4 children and told a fascinating story, and he's told this story once before, about how he had prepared for long periods of time for his first big meeting at EY, which was our new partner and principal meeting in China. And he had prepared, as I said, long and hard, and what wound up happening was at the very end someone asked him if he was going to stay for the dinner. And his comment was, "I'm really sorry, but I'm going home. I made a commitment to my daughter to take her for her driving test, and I want to keep that commitment, so I am flying home after this session." And the way he describes that conversation with this very large audience of new partners and principals was that no one remembered anything else he said other than the fact that he was keeping a commitment to his family. And he's told that story in other venues, but told it at the White House Summit, and I think that was a really important way for him to engage with that audience. One other piece of research and data that we did was we did support the Boston College Center for Work and Family and their research on new dads. And what we focus on at EY is really thinking more about culture and how we continue to enhance our culture and how we continue to think about the culture that we'll all need to work more virtually, more globally, et cetera. And one of the things that we're focused on at EY in the Americas is around parental leave. And again, one of the issues that we have found is that men do feel the stress of being a parent as much, if not more so, at times than women. And so one of the findings that we found at the Boston College Center for Work and Family, their research on paid parental leave and paternity leave specifically, was that although men would like to take 4 weeks of parental leave, they believe that 2 weeks is really what we would call politically correct, socially acceptable. And so men don't always take all the leave that they're eligible for, and that's impacting our families today. One of the things that I had the pleasure to do not too long ago in mid-July was to testify in front of a subcommittee of the Senate on why parental leave is important to EY and why we support parental leave in the U.S. in our organization. And then the last thing I really want to talk about is why do we do this? And we do it because we know that engagement is important. We know that engagement leads to retention and better bottom line. we also do it and get great accolades for it. One of the things that we did last year was we had a mom who agreed to be interviewed by one of the big networks, the Today Show in the morning, and she agreed to be followed around on her first day back from leave, from her extended maternity leave. And that was an amazing and interesting sort of a day for her family, for her new baby, for her spouse, to really talk about how the firm supports our working families. We do it through a lot of ways. We have a lot of communication. We help people to understand how flexible working is really important. We give them information about what we do and the types of flexible working and virtual working that we offer to help people succeed. And we, like Bright Horizons, have had the real pleasure of being on many, many, many Great Place to Work lists, including Fortune for the last 16 years, and I'm proud to say the Working Mother list and for the last 18 years, and we've been in the top 10 for 9 of those years. So very pleased and proud to have created this sort of culture along with many, many, many colleagues at the firm that are listening in today. And with that, Dave, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Mariela. It's always great to hear the story of what you and the EY team has accomplished over the years, which has been really phenomenal and really has served as an important leadership role in the entire field and motivational sort of tool for others to step up to. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to remind you, if you're, even if you're not a real techie like me, totally engaged in social media, that there are many others tweeting at hashtag #SawLive, SAWLIVE. Now, if you want to participate in that, feel free to check out the conversation at hashtag #SawLive. So I want to thank both Mariela and Tammy for their insights. You both have provided over the years important perspective, and today important perspective on the conversation, and really does fit well with the findings that we found in our Modern Family Index. We have the unfortunate problem of having a sea of questions, which is a good thing, and about 10 minutes left on our clock in order to answer them. What we're going to commit to do is try to answer as many of them as we possibly can now, and to the degree we can't, we will try to publish something with answers to these questions afterwards if we possibly can. So I'm going to start out, Mariela, with you. You have a lot of questions in your category. I'm going to try to synthesize 2 of them, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
The first one is, there's a question that said, and I'll just read it verbatim, how do you ensure employees take advantage of all the programs that you actually spend so much time putting in place? And the question that I think dovetails nicely with that, Mariela, is there's another question that says, how do you think about training managers in order to ensure that the things that you do take hold? And I'm really particularly interested in that because one of our key findings in the study was the critical importance of the relationship with supervisor and the ability to have open dialogue about these issues as it relates to this all working. So I wondered if you could just comment on those 2 things.
Sure, Dave. Happy to. One of the things that we've done is we do have what we call milestone events, new manager, new senior manager, so people that are really going to be in that supervisory group. And we do talk a lot there with those groups of people. How do you lead in a very flexible and inclusive way? So that would be the cornerstone of the beginning. But we also do a lot of training around inclusive behaviors and how people begin to think about that. I'll jump into the how do we get people to take advantage. We find that we've got to communicate over and over and over again because people are receptive to things at different times, ages and stages of their life. So we communicate broadly about things like parental leave or Bright Horizons as an example, but it's only until you need it. That's when you're most interested. So making sure that you're critically complete around how often you do it, when you do it, who you're targeting, that sort of thing, I think is really, really important. I hope that helps. I'm happy to continue talking, but I'm cognizant of time.
No, thank you so much. Tammy, I'm gonna turn to you with a question. I'm going to try to do the same thing, synthesize a couple of questions into one. The first question we had for you was, I love the work. I completely agree with a lot of the thoughts and how they apply to the workforce. But can you give some sort of practical thoughts about how we can help to bridge the generational gap between managers who might be boomers and employees who might be Xers, or managers who might be Xers and employees who might be millennials, and what have you seen done from a best practice point of view in order to make that all work? That's the first part. I'll stop there, I'll pause, and I'll give you the second one after you comment on that.
Well, I think the most effective thing is getting people to talk about these issues and to recognize that it's not an individual issue. It's not something that reflects on a particular person who is perhaps seems to have a different point of view than yours, but in fact there are some broad trends here. And certainly, the research data that you've provided and other ways of looking at it are ways to say to people, look, this is a broad-based issue. And there are some logical and legitimate reasons that people feel this way. It's not just people have all of a sudden decided that family is important. It's that they grew up at a time when they saw a lot of things happening which caused them to put a high priority on family. So the more we can help people understand the logic and legitimacy, I think it really helps them understand that this is something that we should have empathy for in our points of view as leaders.
Yeah, more communication about the issues themselves and sharing of this data, I agree, are really key. Tammy, I'm going to ask you a second question. We got one that just read, what data do you have on marital status for millennials? I want to just pick up on that quickly and say one of the other items that came out of our study, which supports all the data out there that we've been following at Bright Horizons for years, is the reality that younger people are waiting longer to have children, particularly young professionals who are married. If you look at the birth rates above age 35, of moms age 35, have really been off the charts, even over age 40. And whether or not you see this as an issue, and if so, what relevance this has to the conversation we're having.
Well, it's definitely what I see, too, in terms of the data. And, in fact, I don't have overall data about, really millennial marriage rates, other than that they would be quite low at this point because, in fact, many millennials still being in their 20s have not yet reached the stage where they've chosen to marry. I think what it means is we're going to have more and more people who are at senior points in their career or fairly responsible points in their career still juggling small children. So people will be in their late 30s and maybe even early 40s, and they'll have very responsible jobs within your organization, and they're going to have very complicated lives in terms of kids who need attention as well.
Yes, I think that's clearly what we continue to see as we look just even at the users of our programs that Bright Horizons offers across our employer clients. We see the average age of use higher than what it had been historically 10, 20 years ago. So, and I would expect that it correlates exactly with what you just said, Tammy, that these folks are in more significant positions in organizations than maybe they were 20, 25 years ago. So let me come back to you, Mariela, with another question, and it reads like this. It says, "I was really interested to hear your correlation of vacation to success. Do you have any data that correlates, or any thoughts about correlating users of all the programs that you put in place with actual performance or individual success or growth within the organization in any way?"
Wow, that's a fascinating, really fascinating question. I don't think we've ever really measured what people use. Again, we do know that engagement among our parents is the highest among the professionals at EY. So my hypothesis is that those folks use a lot of the what I would call the more programmatic solutions that we provide, like paid parental care, paid parental leave, backup childcare, and all of those. But the most important piece of what our people use is what we call day-to-day flexibility and the ability to manage and control, if you will, your schedule. So, and that we track how many people are on formal, flexible work arrangements, and I'm proud to say that we've got hundreds of people that have been promoted to partner, principal, executive director, and director on a formal, flexible work arrangement. But we don't actually know, we don't track in any way how many people use day-to-day flexibility. Our assumption is nearly everyone does.
Okay, well that's helpful, and I think maybe provides an area for us all to continue to look at over time. I'm going to throw out a question that maybe Tammy, you can feel free, and Mariela, you can both feel free to respond to. I'll even kick in if there's time afterwards. And it says, I provided significant data to our leadership to support a variety of these issues, but for whatever reason I can't seem to get them to buy in. Can you talk at all about sort of making the business case and some suggestions for continuing to engage senior leadership around these issues? And so Mariela or Tammy, if you want to just maybe provide any insight into that.
Dave, I'm happy to talk about what we called our career and family transition coaching program. When we thought about doing it, we looked at both external vendors and wound up using internal resources. But we did a very typical return on investment, and we looked at how much a coach would cost and how many people we would have to retain in order to support that coach's salary. And it was a very easy, in my view, very easy math equation to support that return on investment. So I think that's probably one of the critical components of doing any business case is really what are you paying for and what are you getting in return.
Right. And Tammy, any thoughts from you on that subject?
Well, I don't know if it's directly applicable, but I would tell you one of the tricks that I often use, which is I often run into recalcitrant senior executives who are very resistant to thinking about the programs that young folks would like. And I often ask them if they have kids. And of course, many say yes, they do. And then I ask them how whether their children would like to work in this organization or whether they've recommended this organization as a place to work for their kids. And it's quite amazing to me the number who stumble and stammer when they're asked that question. And many tend to say something like, well, my kids are different. My kids are special. My kids wouldn't want to work in this type of an organization. But of course, as soon as the words come out of their mouth, they realize how silly that sounds because, of course, the reality is everyone's kids are different and special and unique and don't want to work in an organization like this. So I think the more we can get people to draw on their personal experience and really stop and think about it instead of just rotely following the rules as they've always been, we can sometimes break through that resistance.
Yeah. I guess in our experience over time, it's been a combination of things like Mariela talked about, data that really does support it from a mathematical point of view, but also both real-life personal experience and the real-life personal experiences of significant people within their organizations who end up championing the issue to the folks that might be resistant to it. So I think all those things meshed together really serve to be the answer to the question. I actually received two questions for me that I'm going to just quickly comment on, and then I think we're going to have to wrap time-wise. The first question was an easy one. Will Bright Horizons revisit this study in the future and see how things have changed? And the answer to that is absolutely. We are committed ongoing to studies like the Modern Family Index to continue to take the temperature of the evolving needs of working families and how the issues facing working families continue to change. That's something we've been committed to for, as I said, over 26 years, and something we'll remain committed to going forward. We have this great ringside seat into this issue, serving over 850 clients in virtually every industry in 6 countries, and really want to continue to parlay that data into meaningful research that helps people, but also into solutions that directly help working families to deal with the friction between work and life. And then lastly, the question was, how do you expect the support strategies for working parents and caregivers to change in the next few years? And I think the answer there is that I've watched as the variety of different solutions that are available to working families through employers have been sort of siloed one by one. Childcare over here and flexibility over here, and I think today it's a much more holistic approach where employers are offering employees supports across the board like flexible work, but also other solutions that deal with all of those critical life stage issues that cause friction between work and life. It's not just a child care issue. It's not just an elder care issue. There's lots of other life stage issues that cause that friction, and the ability to make somebody more productive through an array of solutions that really touch people when they need it most, I think really is the key, and to have that packaged holistically as opposed to different programs that are in silos in different places, to me is the trend, and one that I think will continue over the next couple years. So just wanted to answer those couple of questions quickly, and to the other 30 or 40 of you who asked questions that we didn't have time for, we will do our very best to put out some answers to those questions. And as I said earlier, we're going to be pushing you the slides for today's presentation. And given that we're bumping up against the end of our hour, I just want to quickly thank Tammy Erickson for taking the time across the pond to spend with us today. Your insights are incredibly valuable. We appreciate your research and look forward to your continued leadership in the field. And to Maryella Gockel, we appreciate all you do at E&Y, all E&Y has done to motivate the field. And thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate both of you. Thanks so much. And to everybody on the call, to our clients, thank you. And to those out there interested in Bright Horizons, we look forward to talking to you more. Have a great day.